Hi everyone, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I encourage you to do so. It's completely free and you won't miss any upcoming tutorials. There are many online tutorials that show you how to draw a horse using circles and boxes. The problem with this approach is that it doesn't usually result in a realistic looking horse. So how do you draw a realistic horse? I'm going to break it down for you in 8 overall steps and we'll examine each step in detail. To start out, make sure that you're using good quality reference photos. Working with fuzzy photos or photos where the horse is so small you can barely see it just is not going to help. You can't draw what you can't see. The materials I use to do this drawing include charcoal paper made by Strathmore, it's their 300 series. I also used a 3H pencil, a B grade pencil, a 5B pencil, a blending stump, a kneaded eraser, and a compass for measuring. Another tool I highly recommend is an electric eraser. These things are awesome, especially if you want to erase back in high detail in your drawing. If you want to know where you can get these materials, go to my blog, which is mysketchjournal.com. There's a link below to the resources page. I describe these materials in more detail. I also have links on where you can get them. Okay, let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is very lightly roughen an outline of the horse to indicate its placement on the paper. This does not have to be perfect, or it doesn't even really need to look like a horse. It should just be a general idea so that you have an approximate start and end point to make certain it will all fit on the paper. Do this very lightly with an H grade pencil so that you can easily erase these lines later if desired. You'll see that you can barely see the pencil lines when I'm doing this. This is for a couple reasons. Like I said, if you want to erase this later, keeping the lines light are going to help with that. Also, if you press down too hard, and you cause indentations in the paper with the pencil, since this is an H grade pencil, you're not going to be able to erase those. So keep it very light at this point. Okay, now we're going to get into probably the most important part of this tutorial, and that is measurement. We're going to start by measuring the length of the horse's head from the poll to the bottom of the muzzle in the reference photo using either a drawing compass like I use here, or you can use a ruler or a pencil. And you're going to want to see how many times this measurement goes into the length of the horse from the poll to the back of its rump, just below the dock. You don't need to include the tail because the tail is not part of the essential anatomical structure of the horse. It moves around quite a bit. Photo I'm using, the length of the horse's body minus the tail is about 3 2/3 the length of the head. Now on your drawing paper, very lightly draw a slanted line to indicate the top of the horse's forehead from the poll to the bottom of the muzzle. Try to get this as close as possible to the slant of the horse's head in your reference photo. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be close. Okay, now let's measure the length of this line with a drawing compass, a ruler, or a pencil. And you're going to make sure that the entire horse is going to fit into the rough outline you created. Do this by measuring the length of the horse's head in your drawing and making marks of this measurement until you have the proper number of measurement intervals that you counted in the reference photo. You're basically just repeating what I showed you in the reference photo. If the horse's body is going to be too small, make the measurement line of the horse's head a little bit longer. So you're just going to extend that line for the horse's head and then repeat the body measurement. If the horse's body is going to be too big, then you're going to have to make that head a little bit smaller and then repeat the measurements. In my example, the horse's head was a little bit too small and the overall body was too small, so I had to make the head a little bit bigger and then just repeat those measurements so that it would fit into that rough sketch that I had done initially. This step is probably the most important step in the entire drawing. If you don't get the proportions of the horse correct, no amount of detail or subtle shading is going to fix that. So take your time here, make sure you get this measurement correct before you proceed. Now that you're confident that the horse will be the correct size on your paper, you can proceed with making some refinements to the horse's head. Now that you have the head indicated, draw the bottom of the neck. Drawing a line straight down from the first measurement of the point after the pole, I see that the neck ends at the chest right before this line. This location can vary depending on the angle of the head and the neck and the breed of the horse. Now measure the front legs. In my reference photo, using the measurement of the head, I see that in the reference photo, the distance from the chest to the sesamoid bone is equal to the length of the head. When you're drawing the leg, pay special attention to the width and how it tapers as it moves down to the ground. Compare the width of the start of the leg with the width of the head. They usually match up close to the center of the horse's head. Next, draw the other front leg, which in my photo is slanted toward the back of the horse. You can measure for this leg, but I choose just to eyeball it by comparing it with the first leg. Double check the width of the top of the leg with the width of the horse's muzzle area. Now lightly indicate the horse's belly just to get its general placement. Make sure that you have the correct distance between the horse's front and back legs, which will help reinforce the length of the entire torso. Use the head measurement to determine this. In my drawing, I found that the distance between the front of the horse's right leg and the beginning of the back leg was almost 2 head lengths. You'll generally have more success drawing the bottom of the horse's torso and legs prior to drawing the top or the back, since the distance between the legs can help you reinforce the correct length of the entire torso. Now you can roughly indicate the start of the back leg, but when you do, you should find that it lines up with the measurement you had earlier indicated. Don't draw the entire leg until you're certain that the placement and length of the horse's entire torso is correct. If it's not, this is the time to correct that. Confident that the placement of the left leg is correct, you can move on to the right leg, or vice versa depending on your reference photo. I lightly but carefully indicate this leg, still using the 3H pencil. When doing this, be sure to look as much at the negative abstract shape as you do at the legs themselves. This will help you judge your spaces and shapes more accurately. At this point, most of the horse's outline is drawn, which makes it easier to draw the back correctly. Measure the thickness of the torso from the back to the belly and compare it with the head. On my reference photo, the torso at one point is about the same length as the head. Now that you can be certain that the proportions are correct, go through and just make slight revisions to the lines. You might need to just change some angles, make things a little more curved, a little less curved. Now is the time to make those slight revisions. As I make these revisions, I also start to add in some of the important details. You can see I've added in the mouth, or at least an indication of the mouth, the nostrils, and pretty soon I'm going to add in the eye. I want to make sure that these are placed correct, because of any details, these are the most important. Now I'm going to add some indications of muscle and tone. These are going to help define the form of the horse, which will also be emphasized when I begin the shading and indicate the places of light and shadow. This is a stage where you can begin to darken some of your lines. As I said earlier, you don't want to use dark lines at the beginning because you're not sure if your proportions are correct. But once you know that everything is pretty solid and that you have, your torso is the correct length in comparison with the head, in comparison with the legs, then you can go in and start to press down and apply a little bit more pressure with your pencil if you want to have some solid outlines. But I can't emphasize enough, do not do that until you are sure that everything is absolutely correct. Now you can add shading and indications of color. Pay attention mostly to the light and shadow shapes, since that will be the primary way to indicate form. If you have to give priority to either color or form based on light, give priority to the lighting and the form rather than the color. Getting this right is going to give your drawing a high sense of realism, way more than any amount of detail. Focus on the shapes of light and dark and how soft and hard the edges are and where those shapes come together. At this point, I've stopped using the H-grade pencil and I've switched to the B-grade pencil for the medium tones, and I'll use the 5B pencil for the darkest areas. If you haven't yet subscribed, I encourage you to do so. Just click that button below and you won't miss any of the upcoming tutorials. Also, go to my blog, mysketchjournal.com, if you'd like to see a written description of this demonstration.